All right, if you're new here, welcome to the channel. If you're coming back, thank you for returning. Today, we're doing something really exciting. We're working on my 21-foot Toyota Sunrader four-wheel drive conversion. Today, we are going to put the steering, get that all done. So we have the steering arms on, the high steer arms. We just need to get the drag link and the tie rod put in. We're gonna get the steering box mocked up. When we have that where we want it and the axle's on its weight, we'll go ahead and drill the holes for the steering box mount. We're using an updated, newer IFS steering box, and we use this to reinforce the frame. And if we're lucky, our neighbor will also have our frame plates done for us, which are going to reinforce the entire front half of the frame. Eventually, I'll probably go down the entire length of this and reinforce it all with 3/16 steel, but for now, we're just going to do the front. And once we get the frame plates on and the steering on, we can get the shock hoops in and our lower shock mounts on the axle mounted. It seems like we're blowing through this, I know, but we're skipping a lot of things that we wouldn't be able to skip on a customer race because we're able to revisit this because it's ours. We're just trying to get this thing rolling, running, driving so we can get it back outside and get back to customer work. So enough talking for me. Let's go ahead and start this steering fiasco. And once the steering's done, we'll get the engine trans T-case and get the T-case trans cross member done. Alright, so first things first, we're going to get started on the steering. In order to get the steering box installed properly, we need to get all the components mocked up and in place to make sure the drag link and tie rod are as parallel as possible, as well as ensuring neither are touching each other. Once we got the steering box mocked up, I found out that I pushed the front axle way far forward and that the body mount of the truck is now in the way of where the steering box wants to be. Not ideal, but not a huge problem. We just cut out part of the body mount and carried on. Now that I have the holes drilled and the frame reinforcements in place, I decided that instead of tacking it all together and checking everything 100 times like I normally would, I'd just call it good and kick myself later if it didn't work out, and I burned all the plates in. Once the plates were burned in, I realized that the inner fender needed some massaging to get the steering box to fit, and the frame plate needed a little adjusting with a grinder. Alright, so we got our steering box in there. Well, the steering box mount, the reinforcement kit, and now we've got the 3RZ, got the EGR delete on it, got it all sealed up, everything but the valve cover gasket, because I might get this powder coated, I'm not sure yet. And now we're gonna do the first fit with the new motor mounts in the bay. So we're gonna throw it in here. We're also gonna throw the trans and T-case on so we can build the trans cross member because that also needs done today. But I did get the steering box ready and in. If we get the trans cross member built today, I will consider that a good day. So let's stab this motor and put the trans in. So this was the first fit up of the engine in the truck, and man, it felt good putting this thing in there. It was like it was meant to be there. The transmission went in just as smoothly and again fit just like it should. So we have gotten a lot done and we have the whole crew here now. So we got this project getting sorted. We were waiting on an FSM. It's getting sorted. We got some wiring that we're battling through, but this project is also getting a little bit of attention. Engine, trans, and T-case are all in their final resting position, which is huge. Right now, Tom is working on getting the 529 ARB differential cleaned up. We got the old differential out of here. This is just a 410. So we are going to 529s in this 35-inch tires. So we had to pull the old 410 out. This is a full float, so you just pull these shafts out and you can pull the pumpkin. And on the front, this is out of my rock crawler. So my poor rock crawler, my first gen, it's on blocks now, and there's no axles under it, and it's looking pretty sad. But hopefully we have something in store for that, maybe a 14-bolt Dana 60 combo. So we'll see. But for the time being, we're just going to keep plugging away. I'm going to pull all of this back out now that we have everything finalized. We got more stuff we need to get out of here. We need to get the fuel lines out of here. This clutch, the old clutch line mount is in the way. There's a lot of stuff that still has to get cut out of here. And just keep trekking along. Hopefully this thing will run and drive very, very soon. Off-Road Solutions almost has a harness done. Oil pan kit's on the way. Skies Off-Road is sending us the final few things that we need to get the rear end wrapped up. And yeah, wheels and tires are almost here, so this thing will be done before you even know it. Here you get a glimpse of what's involved in building custom vehicles, installing things just to remove them right away. Fit up is everything, and you don't know how things fit until you get them where they go. And then generally, to get everything built proper, you have to remove all the parts you just installed, sometimes 5, 6, or 7 times. Here we are pulling the old fuel lines that won't work for the new fuel-injected engine, which can feel crazy going all the way to ground zero to build something, but trying to work with what you have instead of doing it the right way the first time can really come back to bite you. And you can imagine I have found that out the hard way. Now that everything's out of the way, we can get the frame reinforcement plates welded in. I have my neighbor cut these on a CNC plasma table so that for future builds I can just cut them out again and again. These are super overkill and probably not needed, but I'd rather have them and not need them than need them and wish I had them. They also help spread the load of the new shock hoops we're going to put in. When welding on anything, especially a chassis, you need to make sure that you stagger your welds and you don't get any one place too hot. Making sure you skip around and let things cool before you continue on is crucial to keeping everything square and straight and preventing warping. Here you can see Tom getting the rear axle housing ready to accept this new diff. The new diff has 529s and an air locker, which is a huge upgrade. Instead of using a traditional cork or felt seal, we use RTV to seal up differentials and it's never failed us. Once the differential is in, we can throw the axle shafts back in and the rear axle is pretty much wrapped up. So what happened is I got some rubber in, and man, does it look good. So obviously the back end's lower than it will be, and the front end is higher than it will be, but we have an idea of what it's gonna look like, and man, does it look mean. We got the steering done. You saw we have the steering box in. We finalized the actual steering linkage from the steering wheel, so this thing will actually steer now. We have the rear spring overdone. We have airbags that just came in, so we'll be putting airbags in here really soon. We've got the 529 rear diff in. The front axle we have completely torn apart, and we're actually going to be doing that today. So today is front axle day. This is torn apart, ground down. It's ready for its new shock mounts. Had the neighbor cut them out on a CNC plasma table. This our 529 open diff. Have everything cleaned up, torn down. We have all of the hardware and a vibratory tumbler outside. It's getting cleaned up, and we are going to go ahead. Said I was going to wait, but I'm not going to. These are IFS hubs. Solid axle hubs are 1.5 inches narrower, so these IFS hubs will give us 1.5 inches more width. So what we have to do to make these work, these are Toyota Tacoma rotors. These are 86 Toyota pickup calipers, and then these are hubs off of a 86 plus Toyota pickup. So these rotors, instead of bolting on like the old style rotors, will slip on over. You need to chuck these up in the lathe, get them ground cut down to where these rotors slip over, and that's what we're going to do first. All right, so first things first, we got to get the rotors off the hubs. Once this is done, we can head over to the lathe. A lathe is one of those tools that you never know how much you will use it until you have one. This machine has gotten me out of some serious binds, and honestly, it's one of the best fabrication tools I've purchased to date. It's an old Logan lathe from the 60s. It's amazing, and I don't know that I could go without one now that I've had one. Machining is a super satisfying task, and sometimes it can be tedious, but I really do enjoy it. All right, guys, so what we have here is the front axle disassembled into a million pieces. We just got done machining the IFS hubs. This kind of gives you a reference as to where, so this mounting surface is 1.5 inches further out because the bearings and races sit in the same location. This is what it looks like with the Tacoma rotor slipped over the hub rather than the rotor being bolted to the hub like this was. And then we will use new calipers, and those new calipers we'll have to tap, and we'll show you all this when we get there. But for now, we're going to start assembling this, putting the knuckles back together, getting ready to get the burr fields in there, get the diff in there, all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and get started now. And now we get to rebuild the burr fields. This is definitely one of those love-hate things for me. It's not the worst job, but it's far from the best. I make sure everything is extremely clean, and then the first thing I like to do is get the differential in the axle housing. Starting with one side, I first get the new races installed for the trunnion bearings, and then I move on to the spindle. I remove the old copper sleeve and install a new one without damaging it. Can be tricky, but it's not too hard. I like to use new hardware where I can, including the hub and spindle connection. Now that we have the hub and spindle together as a unit with the backing delete kit, we can go ahead and set the preload on the knuckle. This is done by adding or subtracting shims from the top steering arm and the bottom steering cap. This is one of the parts that definitely takes a while, as you have to torque everything down and use a fish scale to measure the preload, and you'll almost always end up doing this 3 to 5 times. Sometimes you'll get lucky and get it on the first or second try, but I think I've only had that happen once. You also have to do this without the axle shafts installed, so once you do get it right, you have to take it apart one last time to get the burr field in there. And as you can see, I finally got lucky and can shove the burr field in now. Before installing the burr fields, make sure that they're super clean and have fresh grease in there. No metal shavings, anything like that needs to be in those joints. It can be difficult getting the knuckle over the trunnion bearings, but it shouldn't be too hard, and maybe have a friend help you. Also, one thing to consider while you're in this far is you should probably just go ahead and replace your Burfield joints. I didn't, and while we were out at King of the Hammers, I quickly found out that mine are very angry. I will be having to upgrade them here in the near future, and I'm thinking that the RCVs are looking great. Once we get the grease wipers on the back of the knuckle, we can go ahead and adjust our steering stop. You might not have to adjust your steering stop, but mine had definitely been tampered with. Now that we've got most everything on the axle pretty much dialed and ready to go, we're moving over to our manual locking hubs. The first thing we're going to do is take these apart and inspect them for any broken or damaged pieces. Once everything was apart, we went ahead and washed them and got them ready for paint. Then we went ahead and put some black and red paint on them to make them look brand new. Now that we have the manual locking hubs dialed in, we're moving over to the hubs themselves. Now this is what the manual locking hubs bolt to, and then this bolts to the spindle to make everything roll. So like everything, we want this to be super clean. The first thing we're going to do is clean it out and get the new races installed. Once the new races are installed, we're going to go ahead and head over to the press and get the old lug studs out and put the new lug studs in. Once we have the new lug studs in, we can head back over to the table and start getting the bearings installed. You want to make sure you pre-pack your bearings with wheel bearing grease before you install them, because if you don't, you're going to burn them up. I really like being generous with how much grease I use. I really think it would be hard to use too much grease in an application like this. Once we have everything greased up proper, we can go ahead and install the wheel bearings and get the inner wheel seals on. Now that everything's together, this is the moment of truth. We can finally install the hub onto the spindle. This is where things are getting real. We're getting the front axle completely finished, and it's got gears, it's rebuilt, and it's ready to install on the truck. Be gentle with the seals. Got our bearing, throw that in. We're going to spin it. That's 4 foot-pounds. Huh. So we've been hard at work rebuilding this front axle. Everything was going really well. We got the knuckles rebuilt. We painted them a little bit. We put the old steering arms on just because I do want to get most everything powder coated. I got the low range off-road backing delete kit, and we had what I thought were IFS hubs on. It turns out these are like Land Cruiser hubs, FJ60. So they're wrong. Machined them down, did all the work, cleaned them off, and all for nothing. So we went outside to my junkyard, and right next to the Land Cruiser hubs were these IFS hubs. So we're gonna get those machined down and cleaned up, then machined down, and we will install them on here. Luckily, Brad from Sunrader Overland was here, and he had some extra bearings, or else I'd be out a week and I'd be really pissed off. So luckily, I'm replacing his bearings. I'm gonna go ahead, pull this hub off, get everything ready, put it under the truck. We'll start with shocks and stuff. I'm kind of at a standstill while we wait for these to get clean. I'm going to soak them overnight in the parts washer, and then we will go ahead and machine these down on the lathe like you saw with the first hubs, and we will get these IFS hubs installed for real. I'm pretty bummed, but it is what it is. It's all about taking action and not dwelling on the past. So we'll go ahead, get this ripped off, get everything ready, get those soaking, and get the rotors separated, and then we will continue by putting this axle back under here and starting shock stuff. So let's get to work. While we wait for the IFS hubs to degrease, we're gonna go ahead and put this axle under the truck, and we're gonna get the shock tabs mounted on the axle, and we're gonna get the shock hoops mounted on the frame. Just gonna tack it all together now, make sure everything's happy, get shocks in there, flex it out a little bit, and go from there. So while the new knuckles were soaking in the parts washer, it was time that we throw this axle under the truck for one of the final times. The goal here is to get the axle in its final resting location. Once it's in that location, we can go ahead and dial in the shock hoops on the frame, and we can get the shock tabs on the axle built up. But, of course, the obligatory throw the parts in before they're ready shot has to be done. So after quite a while of struggling with multiple different things, look at this unit! You can't tell me that looks bad. We've come to the conclusion that my steering stop has to go for the shock mounts, because we want that to come up just a hair. So we're gonna cut the steering stop off, weld the shock mount where we want, and we'll build a new steering stop into the shock mount tower. But I mean, just stepping back, that's so crazy. That view is just, wow. All right, so let's get to work and finish this thing up and get at least one half of this truck done tonight, because tomorrow's Monday and I better get back to work. So these shocks I ordered a few years ago are valved extremely stiff, so the jack is just to help me get them locked up. Yeah, buddy. I wonder if my tire fits. Let's see. Oh, looks like it fits. Gee. Did I just create a monster, or did I just weld that shock on wrong? Now that we've proved the concept, it's time to move over to the other side and do the same exact thing. The only difference between this side and the other side is this side has to mirror the other side identically, so the upper and lower shock mounts need to be in the exact same spot. Alright guys, so we got the IFS hubs on. There's a really long story. I machined the wrong hubs the first time. Didn't know till it was all together. We had the bearing races put in and everything. So luckily I had extra races, got the actual IFS hubs on here, and I got them machined down and everything's good. We have the preload set. I'm waiting till I get tires on to make sure everything's happy. We also got the shocks mounted. We got the lower shock tabs on. We had to cut the steering stop off, so we do have to build a new steering stop on this side. We got the shock hoops on. We'll mount the reservoirs probably right here. And these ridiculous triple bypass shocks. So what we're gonna do now is get the calipers tapped. So we're tapping these to M14 by 1.25, and then they bolt on here with these new bolts. So bolts, lock washers, tap this, use a spacer in between the rotor and the mounting surface here, or I'm sorry, the caliper and the mounting surface here, and everything usually is good to go. So we'll go ahead and do that, and I'll show you what we have to do in the end. Bam! New brake rotors, new brake calipers, and new hardware. So looks good with the shocks over there. And we got a huge stoke moment today, because boom, got ourselves some wheels. So I got these from nexttires.com. They had the best price. RC's who I talked to, he's just super cool dude, helped me out, got the best price on the wheels. Tires I got on eBay, these are Kenda Clever RTs 35, 10, 5, 17. Super all ball size tire, and there's not many options to choose from, and I've had good luck with Kenda in the past. If you guys are out there, hook a brother up. Tires are expensive. So we're gonna go ahead, get these wheels and tires on the rig. We're gonna get the adapters from Adaptec, and we're gonna throw those on the rear so we can run the 8 on 6.5 on the Toyota 6 on 7.25 pattern. So our buddies at Bora Adaptec, or Motorsport Tech, whatever you want to call them, they hooked it up and they got us some adapters. We use them again for all our stuff. So if you got a Toyota motorhome and you want other options on wheel size, you can call them and they will hook you up with a super sick set of adapters, super safe. And I mean, it's so nice to be able to run 15, 16, 17s, whatever you want. You can go to whatever lug pattern you want. You can also get matching for the front. So just keep that in mind. So let's go ahead, throw the adapters on, see what this thing looks like on its own weight with its new wheels. Holy cow, you guys. We have ourselves an absolute weapon. This is unreal. So I'm still sitting here in shock, so that's where the axle sits at right height. I might have pushed it a little extra forward, but that's okay. Approach angle is the best. Got the rear single dually on. We have one more inner wheel coming. It will be here, but for now we just got the one on, and she barely fits. The axle actually isn't center in this wheel well, but it is center in the other wheel well, so that's interesting. Have to make sure we got all our measurements right. It's squatted right now quite a bit, and there's no engine or trans or drivetrain or anything, but holy cow, look at this unit, man. So I'm stoked with the progress. Unfortunately, progress is gonna have to go on hold for a little bit, but not for you guys, because I'm gonna try and save all of this, drop it all at once. So until next time, we'll see you in the next episode. We got the wheels and tires on, suspension, the front suspension is pretty much done. Next episode, we're gonna be doing rear suspension, airbags, possibly a sway bar. We'll see if we have time. We'll get this thing running. We'll more than likely get it driving. And next time you see me, this thing should run and drive. So let's hope that's true. And we'll also have the other dually wheel. Don't look at that, don't look at that. So thank you guys again. Hit that like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll see you later.